In this video, I'll show you how I made the Witch King or Ringwraith robes.
So as you can see, before I even cutted the patterns, I basically sketched out every pieces I need to do for the Witch King's cloak and everything from there. So basically I had to make sure I create the inner robe first, that I had to measure like where a certain piece will be sewn to, how big I want the sleeves to be, and also how the outer robe will be done as well to be placed on top of the inner robe, where it should be sewn so I can have more freedom and flowiness throughout the cosplay, and how I want also the caplet to fall in place as well with this cosplay. So I had to do all these sketches out first to know in which direction I wanted to go with this cosplay. So once I did that, I was able to start now modifying the existing patterns I had to do for this cosplay.
So I went and unrolled my brown paper and began to trace out the patterns on the brown paper. So basically the patterns I used was based off Lord of the Rings old costumes and on Star Wars costumes of a Jedi robe. But since the patterns I had were made when I was younger, and so some of the patterns were already cut out, so made for a small adult, and so I had to readjust those patterns and trial and error to remeasure them to be for a larger adult, which is because I'm a bit taller now. And I basically went and redraw all those patterns to fit my size and in the right dimensions as well. As for the sleeve itself, I want to have a bigger opening where the hand comes out because I want to have that nice droop of the fabric at the end of the sleeve. So basically I took the original sleeve from the Lord of the Rings set of the robes and I just gave a more wider opening. And then after that I just connected all those lines together and went ahead and start mapping the new pattern for the sleeves. As for the Ringwraith hood, it was very square pattern, so I wanted to make sure to have a more of a curved droop in the back of my head. And also I need to extend the forward of the part forward a bit as well, because I want to have that extra droop in the front to make the Ringwraith look of the hood. So I went ahead and adjusted that pattern as well. To make sure that my patterns I made and the measurement I measured out as well were done properly, is I went and used some old fabric and some cheap bed sheets as well, because I want to make sure that all those worked out very well. So I did a prototype of the Ringwraith robes, and I can easily say I was very pleased on the result because everything fitted me properly and fell into place the way I wanted to recreate the Ringwraith. Now that the prototype was a success, I went ahead and started cutting out all of the black material for the robes. When I did the robes as well, is I went ahead and used 3 different type of black material. The reason I did that is because I wanted to give some heavy fabric into the robe and some light fabric in the robes, and also different type of texture of the fabric into the robes as well, as because it will allow me to give more depth and volume to the character. So now everything has been cut out, and I started with the inner robe first for the sewing. So with the sewing of the inner robe, I had to do a collar to help hide my neck, so I cut some interfacing and to make it more sturdier. And after that I went and sewed that together with my fabric, and then I cut some V grooves in here. That allows me to do an inside out of the material, so I can have a nice curved around those areas as well. Still with the main collar piece, I had 2 small little areas that I had to prepare before I can even connect that to the main robes, where I had to do some small sewing before I can do to the main robe. I then went iron out the main front piece of the robe to where I can pin out the small piece I did earlier to the main front robe, and I can sew those 2 pieces together now. Now that was done, now I can start pinning all the other pieces of the main inner robe together. So I start pinning the front of the robe to the mark so I can still have an opening in the front. I then went and back to the machine and started sewing all those pieces together inside out. And then I pin the sides of the other pieces of the robe from the back to the front now, pinning all that all the way to the bottom. Back to the sewing machine to sew that again inside out. I then went and pinned the collar to the collar of the robe itself, so I can sew all that in place. Now that has been sewn in place, I went ahead and pinned the other side of the collar in place as well, tucking in the interface, and then I will use a sewing needle and start sewing by hand all of that to do an underseam. I then went and folded the sleeve in two, pinned one side together, and then went and sewed those two sides together inside out as well, of course. Went and pinned the sleeve to the main inner robe together. I then went and sewed the sleeve and robes together. And voila, we now got the inner robe all sewn up all together with a nice long sleeve and everything. And now onwards to the outer robe, which includes the hood. So I went and pinned the hood all together. I then went and sewed the hood together and did the hemming of the front of the hood as well. When that was done, I went ahead and started pinning all the inner robe pieces together, sewing all that together as well. I even went also to pin all the caplet pieces together. And then I went and sewed all the caplet pieces together and did all the hemming as well. Now you can see, now we have a nice robe for the regular Ringwraith, and the robes works well as well for the Witch King as well. One of the things I need to do as well with the Witch King's cosplay is I need to be able to hide my face, because when I put the crown on, I still see my face through it. So to help hide the face is I got some nice black mesh where I can still see through, but still able to hide my face as well underneath the crown. But I was like, how I can keep that connected to my face or on my head without looking awkward? But then I realized I made a cap version style to go on my head that's thin enough, like I did for Makarov, like so. But one thing I just realized is I still have the patterns how I made that. So I'm gonna create a black version without these, and I'll be able to connect the mesh all around here and then just have a little tie in the back to be able to hide this, and this will be all hidden also behind the cloak. So I was like, why not try this out? So therefore I went ahead and started cutting out all of those pattern pieces onto my black fabric to create the little cap. I then went and started pinning all those cap pieces together. Went back to the sewing machine to sew all those cap pieces together. And once all those cap pieces were all sewn together, I went ahead and started cutting out the size of the mesh I need to use. I then went and pinned it to the cap inside out first, and started sewing all of those mesh with the cap together. When all that has been sewn all together, I went and ahead and used some Velcro at the bottom of the mesh, sewing that in place so I can use that to attach it behind my neck when I wear it. And voila, the cap and mesh is now built, and I can easily say it works super well, as you'll see in this clip here. So for the regular Ringwraith hood, they have a unique shape. To achieve this unique scooped hood shape, I basically create my own paper pattern, cut it out into shape, so I'll be able to connect that to my fencing mask, which I'll be using that as a base when I'll be wearing it. And as you can see here, I was able to achieve the unique Ringwraith scooped hood style. since I was pleased, I went ahead and started to cut that piece into EVA foam so I can have it more sturdy on black foam itself as well. The reason I chose black foam is because it will be nicely blended with all the black material I'll be wearing on top of my head. To attach that EVA foam onto my fencing mask is I went ahead and used some Velcro. So I sewed some onto the mask, then I glued the other part onto the EVA foam piece as well. And as you can see here, I'll be able to connect those two pieces together, and I'll be able to remove them as well, so if I can use the fencing mask for other projects and also for traveling. And here you'll see me wearing the fencing mask with the EVA foam, and you'll be able to see that the foam blends very well with my black material, and it gives me the nice look of a Ringwraith as well. To blend the fencing mask even more, I went and used some scrapped a long piece of black fabric, and I create a different length of wedges of fabric zigzagging all across there, not to be perfect since it's a Ringwraith. I then went and used a metal brush and a wooden board on the bottom because I want to make sure I rip and ruin all the edges of the fabric to be very worn out and ripped up, because at the end of the day, I want to make sure it looks more menacing. And also to be more worn, I went and did some little holes with my scissors into the fabric along the wedges. And I used my metal brush to really open those rips open so it looks more like natural rips. Now that I have all those wedges all ripped up and torn, I went ahead before applying them to the mask. I want to make sure that all the white parts of the mask and blue parts of the mask were all covered with black material. So I went ahead and started hand sewing all of that by hand onto the mask. Once all that was done, I then went and sewed all by hand all of those wedges of long different length along the mask so I can have a nice flowing of fabric from the mask itself. Et voila, the mask is now ready for the regular Ringwraith version of the cosplay. One thing about my robe is that it was very long around my feet, and I don't want to trip over my robe that was be the inner or outer robe, so I had to trim some of that down. So I went and measured some of the length I will need to be trimming it off, and I made sure that I don't trim too much because I don't want it to be too short neither. Once I was satisfied with the measurements I did, I went ahead and started cutting it. And I went and cutting it more in a zigzag pattern because I want to be very worn out at the bottom and not perfectly straight. I then went and put the robe back on to make sure everything falls in place properly, and I was very happy. So now all the sewing is completed, I need to be able to give the extra touch to the Witch King's robe to give more of that sinister look. If I don't, it looks still too pristine, too new. It's missing a bit of texture. It's missing a bit of life to the cosplay that has seen stuff. So to help achieve those things, I had to use a few little tools that helps to create this. So I had to use the simple metal brush, the cheese grater, and some scissors. And you can see a night and day after you doing all those things. You see a difference between how it looks before and how it looks with being ripped and seen some aging through it by doing that. You can see right here, like on the right, it's been cheese grated, metal brushed, and even cut along the edge. And you can see on your left here that it's hasn't been done yet, but you can see it's like a night and day difference after just using simple tools like this to help achieve a unique texture of worn and aging to the fabric to give a bit more life to the cosplay. So I'm very impressed on how it's going along, and also it's like two things. It's like heart-wrenching that you're ripping something that you're happy you're sewn, but also it's satisfying to give
a technique to our cosplay that gives more texture and life to the character.
In this clip here, you'll just see me using the cheese grater onto the rope so you can see how I was using it. Also, to make my rope look even more worn out, is I went ahead and started mapping out where I want to put some bigger rips at the bottom of my robes and on the sides of the opening of my robes as well. I went then cutting it more in zigzags, cutting them out everywhere like so. Once I finished cutting out all of those markings out of the robes, I then went ahead and used my metal brush and also the cheese grater to do all on those edges as well to help make it more ripped and more worn as well. When you're done ripping all of those areas there and doing all those cuts, it feels very so satisfying as well, because once you're all done all those parts, it looks very cool at the end of the day. Now it's time to start dirtying my robes. So basically, to help dirty my robes, I basically did a little, basically a stone gravel pit in my own little kitchen. And I start basically dirtying the bottom of my robes with actual natural stone dust because I want to give more of that natural look. One thing I'll recommend, wear a mask because it gets very dusty. And I went ahead and started dirtying every part of my robes, from the caplet to the hood pieces to the sleeves to the bottom of each of my robes, because at the end of the day, that will give that nice natural look of dirtiness to the robes itself. And voila, that's how I made the Witch King's robes and the regular Ringwraith robes for the cosplay.